Get ready for the heart-pounding showdown in our thrilling story. Outlaws harass lone truck driver. They never expected her SWAT skills. When a quiet pit stop is invaded by a dangerous biker gang, one unassuming trucker must reveal her secret background as a highly trained SWAT officer. Packed with covert reconnaissance, tense standoffs, and a daring plan to defend an entire town, this narrative will keep you on the edge of your seat. If you're a fan of action, suspense, and unexpected heroes, you won't want to miss how it all unfolds. Stick around to discover the bold tactics and intense battles that push our heroine to her limits. And of course, find out if justice truly triumphs in the end. Before you dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our exciting tales. Your support helps us continue sharing gripping stories like this one. Buckle up for the adventure. Let's begin. Mia Anders had always preferred the hum of the open road to the clamor of crowded city streets. She spent her life behind the wheel of her trusty 18-wheeler, hauling cargo across the country and relishing the solitude of endless highways. Nestled between desert plains and rugged mountains, the tiny pit stop known as Sand Creek Junction provided a temporary haven for drivers like her. It was the kind of place that didn't make it onto most maps, a dusty patch of land with a diner, a mechanic's garage, and a modest motel. To the outside world, it appeared sleepy and unremarkable, just another out-of-the-way spot to grab coffee and stretch one's legs. No one at Sand Creek Junction would suspect Mia of harboring any extraordinary abilities. At first glance, she was simply a hard-working truck driver in her early 30s, her sandy brown hair perpetually pulled back into a ponytail, her hands rough from years of manual labor. A faded baseball cap shielded her from the blazing sun as she stepped out of her cab. A few patrons inside the diner waved casually, accustomed to seeing truckers of all kinds come and go. Mia acknowledged them with a polite nod, offering a small smile before scanning the menu pinned to the wall. She would order the usual, black coffee and a sandwich, something quick to keep her going until her next stop. Every so often, a flicker in Mia's eyes hinted at something more than the average long-haul driver. She had a certain sharpness in her gaze, an alertness that spoke of disciplined reflexes, as though she was sizing up her surroundings. Indeed, Mia's past was not something she advertised. Years earlier, she had served in an elite SWAT unit, specializing in hostage rescue operations. She had earned commendations for her precision, her cool head under fire, and her ability to think 3 steps ahead. But fate and personal tragedy had prompted her to leave that life behind. Now, she used her honed reflexes and strategic mindset in far less dramatic ways, maintaining safety on the road, avoiding trouble, and occasionally diffusing heated arguments at truck stops. But that day in Sand Creek Junction, as she settled onto a bar stool at the diner, tension hung in the air. She noticed the local radio station's chatter about a biker gang that had been pushing into the region. Vultures MC, they called themselves. They were rumored to be claiming territory along various trade routes, muscling out smaller outfits and intimidating residents. Mia sipped her coffee, discreetly paying attention to the conversation around her. A pair of older ranchers seated behind her muttered something about strange bikes rolling into town at odd hours, threatening store owners for protection fees, and shaking up the quiet life the people of Sand Creek Junction were used to. Mia didn't expect to linger here for long. Her plan was to grab a quick meal, refuel, and continue her route toward the next major city. Yet something about the uneasy undercurrent in the townspeople's voices gave her pause. She thought of how many times she'd seen bullies and criminals prey on small, isolated communities. Though she had sworn off her old lifestyle of confrontation and high-stakes takedowns, part of her itched to stay alert in case things escalated. After all, old habits died hard, and it was second nature for her to keep an eye out for potential threats. If it turned out that these rumors were true, that some gang planned to stir up serious trouble in Sand Creek Junction, Mia would be ready. Even though she considered herself a traveler just passing through, she believed in standing up for ordinary folks. Still, for now, she tucked her concerns away, focusing on her sandwich as the scorching sun climbed higher overhead. Later that afternoon, Mia pulled her rig over near the small motel beside the diner, intending to rest for a few hours before continuing her journey. Though she didn't plan a long stay, The day's high temperatures made it wise to avoid traversing the desert roads until dusk. She stepped out of the truck, stretched her limbs, and strolled around the building to get a sense of the place. The motel's peeling paint and rattling window air conditioners spoke to its age, but she'd slept in far worse places in her career. A teenage boy, lanky and sunburned, sat on a wooden bench under the motel's sign. He was fiddling with a guitar, strumming a few chords that never quite formed a complete tune. When he saw Mia approach, he nodded in greeting. "Passing through?" he asked in a voice that cracked with adolescence. "Yep," Mia replied, taking off her cap to wipe away beads of sweat. "Figured I'd wait out the heat. You from around here?" He shrugged. "Born and raised, though I'm not sure how much longer I'll stick around. Folks say it's not safe anymore." Mia raised an eyebrow. "Because of the biker gang?" The boy nodded gravely, fingers falling idle on the guitar strings. "They're bad news from what I've heard. They used to just ride through occasionally, but lately they've been hanging around. Last week they cornered old Mr. Saunders by the gas station. Demanded protection money, said they'd bust up his place if he didn't pay." Mia frowned. "And did he pay?" "Not yet," the boy answered. "He's too proud, but I'm worried they'll make good on their threats." Before Mia could respond, the squeal of motorcycle engines shattered the still afternoon air. Two bikes roared up the street, their riders clad in dusty leather vests bearing the emblem of a menacing vulture. They slowed as they passed the motel, staring down anyone in sight. Mia deliberately kept her posture relaxed, but her muscles tensed. She remembered that defiant stance from her SWAT days, keeping calm on the outside while adrenaline surged beneath. The bikers gave a mocking salute to the boy with the guitar, then thundered off toward the far end of town. Mia watched them disappear in a cloud of dust. "They want people to be scared," she said quietly, almost to herself. "That's how they maintain control." "Yeah," the teenager replied, eyes lowered. "I hope they don't start something bigger." Mia offered a nod of understanding but said nothing more. She headed back to her truck, her mind whirring with questions. This place, with its fading facades and humble inhabitants, reminded her of the many vulnerable communities she'd seen criminals exploit. In her old line of work, she had intervened in such scenarios, ensuring perpetrators faced the consequences of their actions. Now she told herself she was merely a passing stranger. Still, her instincts, sharpened by years of tactical operations, wouldn't let her ignore the signs of looming trouble. Inside her rig, Mia settled into the driver's seat and cracked open a bottle of water. Resting her head against the headrest, she debated whether to speak to the local authorities. Then again, a place like Sand Creek Junction might have only a small sheriff's department, possibly outnumbered or outgunned by an organized gang. She needed more information before deciding on a course of action. Letting out a measured sigh, Mia resolved to spend the night here. She would keep her eyes open, gather more details, and, if necessary, make a plan. Even if she was just passing through, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was meant to be in Sand Creek Junction right when its residents needed someone with her skill set. Evening drew closer, painting the sky with streaks of orange and purple. Mia found herself wandering into the diner again, drawn by the smell of home-cooked meals and the chance to glean more information from the locals. The interior was modest but welcoming. Creaky booths with checkered cushions, a counter lined with chrome stools, and a jukebox in the corner that seldom played anything newer than the 1970s. Behind the counter stood Ruby, the diner's owner and cook, a stout woman with kind eyes and a weathered face that suggested she'd seen her share of struggles. When Mia sat down, Ruby offered a warm smile. "Hungry again, hun? I make a mean meatloaf if you're interested." Mia nodded politely. "Sure, I'll try it. By the way, I heard about some troubles in town with a biker gang. Is that something you've had to deal with?" Ruby's expression darkened, and she glanced around to ensure no one was eavesdropping. "We all have," she replied in a hushed tone. "They haven't gone after my diner yet, but I keep hearing stories. They're pressuring businesses, especially the smaller ones. They'll make threats, sometimes rough people up if they refuse to pay. Folks are scared, but we don't have many options." Mia remembered the teen at the motel mentioning Mr. Saunders. "What about the authorities, the sheriff's department?" Ruby snorted. "Sheriff Colton does what he can, but he's only got 2 deputies. They can't be everywhere, and they're no match for a big gang. The vultures roll in with 10, sometimes 20 bikes, and they're armed. The department's overwhelmed. As Mia mulled over this, the bell on the diner's door jangled, and a wiry man in a mechanic's jumpsuit stepped in, looking jittery. He took a seat a few stools down from Mia, Monsieur, tapping his fingers nervously on the counter. Ruby greeted him by name, Tom, and asked if he wanted his usual. Tom nodded, then turned to Mia with weary eyes. You're the trucker staying at the motel, right? That's me, Mia answered. He offered a handshake. Tom Hawkins. I run the garage next door. Mia introduced herself briefly, omitting details about her background, as usual. Tom hesitated, then decided to speak. You should be careful, he warned. Word gets around quick in a small place like this. The vultures pay attention to newcomers who might cause trouble for them. You don't want them thinking you're poking your nose in their business. Mia gave a thin smile. I appreciate the heads up. I'm just passing through. Right, Tom murmured, not entirely convinced. Well, watch yourself. Ruby returned with 2 plates of steaming meatloaf, setting one in front of Mia and the other in front of Tom. The mechanic took a bite, though his nerves seemed to kill his appetite. Mia listened intently as he confided that the vultures had begun demanding a fee from his garage to protect him from vandalism. He was running out of ways to stall them, and it wouldn't be long before they came to collect. This used to be a peaceful stop for travelers, Tom lamented softly. Now it's like we're under siege. Mia stirred her mashed potatoes, heart heavy. She remembered the sense of duty she had felt in her SWAT days, the drive to protect innocent people caught in violent situations. She hadn't planned to stay here. She had cargo to deliver, a schedule to keep. But duty had a way of finding her, no matter how hard she tried to walk away from it. As the lights outside dimmed and the vultures' distant engines echoed across the desert, Mia began to consider the possibility that she might need to do more than just observe. If push came to shove, she couldn't just stand by. That wasn't who she was. Nightfall brought a slight chill to the desert air. Mia stood outside her truck, gazing at the sea of stars stretched overhead. In the near distance, the rumble of motorcycles resonated like distant thunder. She had parked her rig at the edge of the motel's lot, away from the bulk of the building, which gave her an unobstructed view of the lonely highway. Leaning against the side of her truck, Mia replayed the day's conversations in her mind. The fear in the teen's voice, the anxiety on Tom's face, and Ruby's resigned acceptance of the diner's precarious situation. Sand Creek Junction was trapped in a vice threatened by a gang that wanted to expand its territory. The local authorities lacked the manpower to protect their own citizens. It all felt depressingly familiar. She glanced toward the horizon, recalling the many times she had relied on her specialized training to help people in distress. She had been an expert marksman, a skilled negotiator, and a tactical thinker within her SWAT unit. The adrenaline had once fueled her. The high stakes had given her purpose. But those days ended abruptly when she lost her brother in a botched operation, an event that haunted her. Since then, she had sought the solitude of the road, trying to outdrive her guilt and grief. Yet tonight, the ghosts of her past swirled around her like restless spirits. Part of her wanted to intervene in Sand Creek Junction's plight, but she questioned whether she had the emotional fortitude to face danger again. She wondered if she could remain calm under fire, or if memories of her brother's final moments would paralyze her at a critical juncture. Mia closed her eyes, steadied her breath, and reminded herself that these people needed help just as much as any hostage from her past missions. If she turned her back on them, she would be denying the very principles she used to hold dear. Lost in thought, Mia almost didn't notice the flicker of headlights approaching from the highway until they were nearly upon her. A pickup truck rattled into the motel lot, its driver clearly in a hurry. The vehicle skidded to a stop near the lobby, and a frantic, middle-aged woman jumped out. She ran inside, leaving the engine running and the headlights casting long, dramatic shadows. Moments later, she reemerged with the motel owner, speaking in hushed but urgent tones. Though Mia couldn't hear the words, she recognized fear in the woman's trembling gestures. She seemed to be describing some altercation or crisis. Mia felt her instincts surge, pushing her to investigate. She started toward them, heart pounding. Even if she was an outsider here, she might be able to offer some assistance. After all, if the crisis involved the biker gang, Her skills could make the difference between tragedy and resolution. Taking a steadying breath, Mia prepared to walk into whatever had befallen Sand Creek Junction under the cover of night, determined to see how she could help, even if it meant stepping back into a life she thought she'd left behind. "Ma'am, please, just slow down," the motel owner said, trying to calm the agitated woman. "Tell us exactly what happened." The woman's name was Karen, a local resident who lived on the outskirts of Sand Creek Junction. She was gasping for breath as she explained that she'd encountered several motorcyclists blocking the road near her ranch. She suspected it was the vultures. They had harassed her, threatening that if she didn't hand over money, she would regret it. When she tried to drive away, they pursued her, hurling insults and smashing her rear lights with chains. She managed to outrun them only because she knew the back roads better. Mia listened from a short distance away, her heartbeat quickening. Karen was rattled, her eyes wide with terror. The motel owner suggested calling Sheriff Colton, and Karen agreed, though she worried it might already be too late for the authorities to do much. If the vultures were brazen enough to attack her in broad night, what else might they be plotting? Sensing that Karen needed immediate reassurance, Mia stepped forward. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," she said gently, meeting the woman's frightened gaze. "Can you describe how many of them there were?" Karen blinked, somewhat startled by Mia's composed demeanor. I think maybe 5 or 6 bikes. They surrounded my truck. They had weapons, guns, I'm sure of it." "Any idea which direction they headed after you got away?" Mia asked. Karen wiped the sweat from her brow. "They turned off onto a dirt road that leads deeper into the desert. There's an old warehouse out that way. Some folks say the vultures use it as a hideout." The motel owner began dialing the sheriff's office. Meanwhile, Mia gave Karen a once-over to see if she needed medical attention. Aside from scrapes on her arm where glass had shattered, she seemed uninjured, shaken but intact. Karen's hands trembled as she clutched her truck keys. "Thank you for asking, but I'm fine," she managed. I don't know what they'll do next." Mia nodded, her mind already racing through tactical possibilities. A remote warehouse could serve as a perfect staging ground for the gang. They could store contraband there, plan bigger moves, or even hold hostages. She reminded herself that she was just a passerby, yet her instincts to protect, to gather intelligence, to neutralize threats came flooding back. When the sheriff's department finally answered, the motel owner relayed Karen's story. Sheriff Colton promised to send a deputy to check on the warehouse, but his tone lacked confidence. Everyone knew a single deputy would be no match if the gang was entrenched there. Mia read the worry in Karen's eyes. Official help might come too little and too late. After the call ended, silence descended over the three of them. Finally, Karen looked at Mia and asked, almost pleadingly, Do you think they'll come back for me?" Mia placed a reassuring hand on Karen's shoulder. "Not tonight. They've got you scared, which is what they want. But if we stand together, they might think twice about coming after innocent people. Try to get some rest. Let the sheriff's department do their job for now." Karen nodded, though her fear remained evident. Mia watched as she climbed back into her truck and drove off to find a safer place to spend the night. The motel owner thanked Mia for her help, then returned inside to wait for the deputy's arrival. Alone once more in the darkness, Mia couldn't shake the sense that events in Sand Creek Junction were about to escalate. The question was, how far would the vultures push, and how prepared was she to confront them? The next morning, Mia woke early, still haunted by Karen's plight. She ambled into the motel lobby, where the owner mentioned that the deputy had driven by the old warehouse in the middle of the night. According to him, no immediate sign of the gang was found, though he suspected they might have simply relocated deeper into the desert. Mia knew that criminals operating in remote areas were adept at hiding their tracks. If the vultures intended to strengthen their hold on Sand Creek Junction, they would not be deterred by one late-night police visit. She also suspected the gang might be coordinating with a larger network, maybe a cartel or another biker club, judging by how organized they seemed. It was never just petty intimidation when groups like this took over a region. It often escalated into drug running, weapons trafficking, or worse. After grabbing a coffee to go, Mia decided to walk around town and observe. She passed by Tom's garage, where she found the mechanic wrestling with a dented fender. He offered a curt nod, clearly too preoccupied to chat. Down the block stood a small convenience store, its windows plastered with signs proclaiming low prices. Inside, Mia noticed the clerk constantly glancing toward the door as if anticipating trouble. Out on the street, she paused at a bulletin board advertising local events, charity drives, church gatherings, and a county fair scheduled for next month. These were the lifeblood of small communities. Mia thought about how these events could be overshadowed by the gang's looming threat. She pictured people staying home out of fear, local businesses shuddering if they couldn't pay protection fees. This was exactly how outlaws tightened their grip, by turning once vibrant communities into ghost towns, reliant on criminal protection. Her phone buzzed, a reminder of the trucking company's schedule. She still had deliveries to make, deadlines to meet. If she stayed here too long, she risked incurring penalties and her boss wouldn't be happy. But the thought of leaving Sand Creek Junction to fend for itself gnawed at her. She finished her coffee and headed for her rig, determined to at least check on Karen's ranch before making a final decision. Leaving the main stretch of town, Mia guided her truck down a long, dusty road. Mesquite and cacti framed the landscape on either side. Eventually, she spotted a small ranch house with a rusted metal roof. A few horses grazed lethargically near a rickety fence. She parked just outside the property and hopped down, scanning for any sign of disturbance. The broken rear lights of Karen's truck told her she was in the right place. Karen emerged from the house cautiously, gripping an old hunting rifle. Her face relaxed when she recognized Mia. "I wasn't sure who it was," she said, lowering the rifle. "Sorry, my nerves are on edge." "I understand," Mia replied, hands up to show she meant no harm. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay." Karen seemed touched by the gesture. She explained that she had barely slept, worried the gang might come back. She'd moved her horses into a more secure enclosure and was considering staying with relatives in a neighboring county until things settled down. "I've never felt unsafe here before," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Mia frowned. "Any further sign of the bikers?" Karen shook her head. "Not yet, but I know they're out there." The fear in Karen's eyes reminded Mia of victims she had rescued in her SWAT days, people whose lives had been flipped upside down by criminals. A flood of memories surged, filling her with both determination and a whisper of dread. She knew how violent such situations could become if left unchecked. With a reassuring nod, Mia said, "If you need anything, let me know. I might be around a bit longer than I planned." Karen's face lit with relief. "Thank you. Honestly, it's good to have someone else looking out for us." Though Mia still hadn't decided on a concrete plan, she felt more certain than ever that she couldn't simply drive away. Something deep within her, call it duty, empathy, or a sense of justice, compelled her to stay. She climbed back into her truck, mind churning with potential strategies for how she might help Sand Creek Junction stand up to the vultures. Heading back toward town, Mia found herself devising a mental checklist. Gather more intel, assess the gang's numbers, possibly identify their leader, and determine if there was any local resource she could utilize. She might be one person, but she wasn't entirely unarmed. She had her personal handgun locked in a secure case behind her seat. It was a holdover from her SWAT days, legally registered yet rarely used since she left the force. On top of that, she still maintained a certain level of physical conditioning through morning exercises and the occasional shooting range visit. She stopped by the diner for lunch, hoping to pick up rumors or tips from Ruby. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Ruby paced behind the counter, looking flustered. A few customers in the booths whispered to one another. Mia slid onto a stool, scanning the room. Ruby approached her, face etched with worry. "You missed the commotion this morning," she said in a low voice. "Some of those biker guys rolled in, trying to intimidate folks. They were riding up and down the street, revving their engines, making it impossible for anyone to think straight." Mia's jaw tightened. "Did they come in here?" Ruby nodded. "Yeah, but I told them I wouldn't pay for protection. One of them knocked over a stack of plates on the counter. I'm worried they'll come back." Before Mia could respond, the diner's door swung open, and a tall man in a worn leather vest entered. Mia tensed. His vest bore the Vulture's MC emblem. He surveyed the room, eyes locking onto Mia. The man smirked, displaying crooked teeth, then strode forward. A hush fell over the patrons. "Afternoon," he drawled, voice dripping with mock politeness. "Heard there's a new trucker in town asking questions." Mia, keeping her cool, turned slowly to face him. "Just passing through," she said, and enjoying a meal before I hit the road. Is that so? He sneered, clearly not convinced. He eyed Mia's muscular arms and confident posture. You sure you ain't staying the while? Mia shrugged, refusing to be intimidated. Schedules can change. The biker chuckled darkly. Well, let me offer some free advice. Stick to your schedule, lady. This place is spoken for. Ruby cleared her throat, trying to diffuse the tension. Can I get you anything to eat? Nah, the biker said, not breaking eye contact with Mia. I'm just here to deliver a message. The vultures run Sand Creek Junction now. Anyone who tries to interfere, well, he traced a finger across his throat in a silent threat. Mia didn't move, her expression unreadable. She recognized the tactic, intimidation through public confrontation. Memories flickered of her SWAT training, how they'd handle aggressors who use threats to control a situation. She felt the urge to escalate, to grab him by the collar and set him straight. But that would be reckless, especially without backup. Instead, she locked eyes with him and said in a controlled tone, "Message received." The biker seemed disappointed he couldn't provoke a bigger reaction. He slapped the countertop for emphasis, cast a final threatening glare around the diner, and then swaggered out. As the door closed behind him, conversations resumed in hushed, urgent tones. Ruby exhaled a shaky breath. He's not even one of the higher-ups, she whispered. Just a grunt. But they're getting bolder, more aggressive. Mia watched through the diner window as the biker rejoined a few others on their bikes, then roared away. She felt her blood simmer. Something told her this was only the beginning. The vultures were testing the waters, seeing how far they could go without real pushback. And if someone didn't draw a line soon, they'd do far worse than knock over plates. By late afternoon, the sun's rays scorched the streets of Sand Creek Junction. Sheriff Colton finally showed up at the diner, tall, lanky, with tired eyes that spoke to many sleepless nights. Mia watched him walk in, noticing how the other patrons greeted him politely but without much hope. The sense that he was overwhelmed was palpable. He took a seat next to Mia at the counter. Ruby poured him a cup of coffee on the house. Heard there was some trouble here earlier, he said, voice resigned. Mia nodded. One of the vultures made a scene. He tried to intimidate me. Sheriff Colton glanced at her. I appreciate you not responding with force. Last thing we need is to escalate things in a crowded diner. But I also heard you've been asking around, maybe considering getting involved? Mia chose her words carefully. I don't like seeing bullies run rampant. The folks here seem decent, and they're scared. Colton sipped his coffee, winced at its heat, and set it down. Look, I don't blame you for wanting to help, but you should know what you're up against. We've got limited manpower. The vultures have been growing in number over the past few months, recruiting, bringing in associates from other chapters. And rumor has it they're stockpiling weapons out in that warehouse. I've put in requests for support from the state police, but bureaucracy moves slow. Meanwhile, these gang members can hit us anytime, anywhere. Leaning closer, Mia lowered her voice. Then let's even the odds. We need intel on their exact numbers, their routines. If we can figure out their next move, we might be able to cut them off or at least scare them enough that they back down. Colton studied her face. You talk like law enforcement. Used to be, Mia said quietly. She offered no further details, but her tone made it clear she had legitimate experience. After a pause, Colton nodded. All right, I won't turn away help if it's offered in good faith. But you have to coordinate with me. I can't have vigilantes running around causing more chaos. Understood, Mia replied. She appreciated his caution. She knew how easily a half-baked plan could fail, endangering innocence. Colton then shared what little he knew. The gang's likely base of operations was that old warehouse in the desert. They sometimes met with other biker groups late at night, possibly to trade illicit goods. Local rumors suggested they had plans to demand heavier protection fees and might target farmland or ranches next. The bigger they get, the bolder they become, he said, rubbing his temples wearily. They're probably aiming to control the entire corridor here, turning it into a pipeline for contraband. Mia listened, formulating a plan. Reconnaissance was the first step, gathering hard evidence of their numbers, armaments, and schedule. She would need to see the warehouse for herself, maybe under cover of darkness. A swift, precise operation could disrupt the gang without letting them retaliate en masse. But she'd need to set up diversions and have a quick exit strategy, just like old times. Before standing up to leave, Mia took out a small notepad from her jacket pocket and scribbled down a number. "Here's my cell," she told Colton. "If anything happens, if you need backup, call me." He pocketed the note. "I hope you know what you're getting into. These guys don't hesitate to use violence." Mia offered a tight smile. "Neither do I when it's necessary." With that, she stepped out of the diner feeling a renewed sense of resolve. The final pieces of her old self, disciplined, strategic, and unafraid, clicked into place. She might have turned her back on her SWAT career, but she could no longer turn away from the good people here who were counting on someone to stand up to the vultures. Night cloaked the desert in an eerie stillness. Mia parked her rig on a deserted side road a few miles from the warehouse's rumored location. She had changed into dark clothing, black jeans, a snug long-sleeve shirt, and boots sturdy enough for rough terrain. Her handgun rested in a holster at her hip, concealed under a light jacket. Years ago, she'd worn tactical gear with the letters SWAT emblazoned across the back. Tonight, she was on her own, no official badge or backup. She locked the truck, setting a simple booby trap on the door, a trick she'd learned to alert her if anyone tampered with the vehicle. Then she walked along the moonlit path, stepping carefully to avoid crunching twigs. The warehouse stood on the far side of a rocky outcrop, illuminated by a single floodlight. Weeds and tumbleweeds adorned its perimeter. Rusty chain-link fencing, topped with barbed wire, encircled the structure. Mia noted the presence of a couple of motorcycles parked near a side entrance, indicating at least a few gang members were present. Moving low to the ground, she circled the perimeter, scanning for cameras or guards. She spotted one guard, a heavy-set man leaning against the main door, lazily smoking a cigarette. Two more figures stood near the loading dock. She kept her distance, using the shadows to her advantage. Her heart pounded with the familiar rush of an operation, but she forced herself to stay calm and methodical. Crouching behind a stack of abandoned crates, Mia peered through a dirt-smeared window. Inside, dim lights revealed rows of wooden pallets and metal shelving. She glimpsed shapes that might be crates of firearms or stolen merchandise, hard to confirm from her vantage. What she did see clearly, however, were more bikers milling about, armed with pistols or shotguns slung over their shoulders. Careful not to make noise, she placed a small digital camera against the glass, snapping pictures. Every bit of evidence would help Sheriff Colton make a case for additional support from higher authorities. Mia figured there were at least a dozen gang members in the warehouse tonight, possibly more. That was already enough to overpower local law enforcement. Her plan was simply recon. Get in, document what she could, and get out. But as she prepared to move to a second vantage point, she heard the roar of more motorcycles arriving. A row of headlights cut through the darkness, approaching the warehouse. She ducked lower, heart racing. At least 5 more bikes pulled up, each rider wearing the Vulture's emblem. One of them, a tall man with a black bandana, was greeted with a deference that suggested he was a high-ranking member. Mia eavesdropped as best she could. The men talked about the new territory and closing in on the holdouts. They mentioned businesses by name: Tom's Garage, Ruby's Diner, even Karen's Ranch. The tall man declared, "We'll make our final push this week. Anyone who doesn't pay gets their place trashed. We show them we mean business." A chill ran through Mia. This was more than sporadic bullying. They were organizing a large-scale extortion campaign. If they succeeded, Sand Creek Junction's small economy would collapse under the gang's iron grip. She snapped more photos, capturing their faces in some of the crates near their feet. Suddenly, a guard at the corner of the building lit a flashlight, swinging it across the fence line. Mia pressed herself against the crates, holding her breath. The beam swept over the area, lingered a moment, then moved on. She waited until it passed before slowly inching away, retreating the same way she had come. By the time she reached her truck, her pulse was hammering, but adrenaline kept her alert. She quickly disarmed the simple trap she'd set, climbed into the cab, and locked the doors. Only then did she allow herself to exhale. She had the intel she needed, along with photos that proved the Vulture's intentions. Now the question was how best to use this information to stop them permanently. Back at the motel, Mia spread the photos on her bed, illuminated by a single lamp. She used her phone to magnify certain images, noting license plates on the motorcycles and the faces of the bikers. Some wore patches indicating specific ranks: road captain, treasurer, sergeant at arms. The tall man with the black bandana likely held a top spot in the gang's hierarchy, perhaps the local chapter president. Sheriff Colton arrived a short while later, quietly slipping into the motel room. Mia handed him the camera. "Everything's on here," she said. "They're preparing for a major move." He scrolled through the images, letting out a low whistle. "This is more evidence than we've been able to gather in months. If I had more deputies, I'd raid the place tomorrow." "But you don't," Mia finished the sentence for him. "And if you try to storm the warehouse with only a few officers, it'll end badly." "Exactly," he muttered, frustration evident. "I've alerted the state police, but they might not mobilize fast enough. We need a stopgap measure, something to slow the gang down or make them reconsider." Mia thought of her training, how she and her SWAT team used to plan for worst-case scenarios. She considered the Vultures' likely timeline. They aimed to make their final push within days. Waiting for official backup could mean the difference between shutting them down cleanly or letting them terrorize the town unchecked. "We set a trap," she proposed. "We lure them into a confrontation on our terms, not theirs. If we can isolate some of their key members, we can force them to stand down, or at least cripple their operation enough that the rest scatter." Colton looked skeptical. "We'd need help from locals, but these people are not trained fighters." "They don't have to be," Mia replied. "We just need a few volunteers who can handle themselves or help set up strategic positions. We control the battlefield. We can use the layout of the town, vehicles as barricades, maybe even the element of surprise." The sheriff nodded, slowly warming to the idea. "I can think of a few folks who are fed up and want to protect their livelihoods. Tom was in the Marines, I believe. And old Mr. Watson used to be a hunterman. He's still a crack shot." They hashed out the basic plan. Mia and Colton would gather a small group of reliable locals. They'd choose a choke point, somewhere the bikers had to pass if they wanted to reach the main street. The group would create diversions using vehicles and makeshift obstacles to funnel the Vultures into a kill zone. Mia would handle the front lines, her SWAT training giving her the best chance to neutralize threats without causing unnecessary casualties. Meanwhile, Colton and a couple of armed volunteers would provide cover from vantage points. It was risky. A lot could go wrong. But it was better than waiting for the gang to strike at their leisure. The next morning, Mia, Sheriff Colton, and their small band of volunteers set up in an abandoned section of road leading into Sand Creek Junction. They used Tom's tow truck, an old farm tractor, and a few large oil drums to block off key escape routes. Mr. Watson, armed with a scoped rifle, found a perch on a dilapidated rooftop. Karen, determined not to be a victim again, stood guard at a side alley with a shotgun. Tom readied himself behind the tow truck, his military training kicking in. Mia's heart pounded as she lay prone behind a makeshift barricade, scanning the horizon through binoculars. In the distance, the rumble of engines grew louder, signaling the Vultures were on the move. Glancing over at Colton, she saw the tension etched on his face. He clutched his sidearm, crouched near a pile of crates. "Everyone hold positions," Mia hissed into a handheld radio. "Wait for my signal." The next few moments stretched interminably as the motorcycles came into view. 10, 12, then more, easily 15 bikers roaring down the dusty road. Leading them was the tall man with the black bandana, his posture exuding confidence. They slowed upon seeing the obstacles, revving their engines in challenge. "Remember," Mia whispered into the radio, "we show force, but we don't fire unless they do. We want them to surrender or retreat." As if on cue, the gang's leader shouted for the barricade to be moved. One of the bikers brandished a weapon, firing a warning shot into the air. Mia tensed. The moment of truth had arrived. For Sand Creek Junction, for Karen, for Tom and Ruby, and for Mia herself, this was the stand that would determine if evil would continue to rule or finally be driven out. Her finger hovered near the trigger of her handgun, her mind alive with muscle memory from countless high-risk raids. Through the swirling dust, she locked eyes with the tall man. He raised his gun. Mia exhaled, steeling herself. "Now!" she yelled. In an explosion of motion, the final confrontation began. Looking back on the incredible stand against the vultures, it's clear that courage, unity, and determination won the day. From Mia's undercover skills to the locals' unwavering spirit, everyone played a vital role in safeguarding their home. In the aftermath, Sand Creek Junction regained its peace, and the community emerged stronger than ever, reminded that adversity can forge unbreakable bonds. From a personal perspective, this story highlights how ordinary folks, armed with heart and the will to do what's right, can overcome even the darkest threats. We hope it inspires you to believe in the power of resolve and camaraderie. What did you think of the showdown in the final resolution? Let us know your thoughts and ideas in the comments. We'd love to discuss your favorite moments or hear your take on how things wrapped up.